Hey everybody, Papa Wiggs here with Wiggs. We're going to do our week one recap from the Sunday games. So let's jump right in it. First game we're going to talk about here with the Panthers versus the Saints. Wow, what can we say about this, Wiggs? Panthers look like a hot mess. They didn't look like they were prepared for this game at all. Derek Carr, he had a he had a okay game. You know, 3 TDs, 200 yards. Alvin Kamara had a total of 110 yards with the TD on New Orleans side. The big surprise to me in this game was they had 47 points and they targeted Chris Olave like 3 times, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So little surprising there. 4-0, their tight end had a decent game. And then on the flip side, the Panthers, Bryce Young had 161 yards through 2 interceptions. I mean, I don't even. Adam Thielen was their leading receiver with 3 receptions for 49 yards. They were just a mess. So yeah, I don't know that there's much more to say about that game. Wiggs, what do you think?
Bryce Young needs to get a grip. You have the talent around you now, so get your receivers the dang ball. That's all I really got to say. It was a really pathetic performance from him and his team. So
Yeah, because he was only 13 for 30, so he was like 40 some percent uh, passing percentage. That's not good. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on the Carolina situation, and then that moves us into the Vikings game. Listen, for all you Vikings fans out there, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, as I've been called, but listen, we played the Giants. Okay, we should have won this game, and we should win this game by 28-6, like we did, right, Wiggs? I mean, don't get me wrong. Sam Darnold looked good. He had what 14 in a row completions, I think, at one point. I mean, he didn't look bad, but with that being said, he still, when he doesn't have a clean pocket, he panics, and he showed that on the one interception where he obviously should have just held the ball, and instead his arm got deflected, and he threw an interception. Aaron Jones, I thought, looked really good, a lot better than I thought. That Giants defensive line's pretty tough. Jefferson didn't have a huge game, but he still had 59 yards and a touchdown. And then Jordan Addison got hurt. We'll have to keep a close eye on that. And then on the flip side, Danny Dimes. Oh my God, he looked pathetic. Sorry, I mean 2 interceptions. He couldn't hit his receivers to save his life. Their running game is non-existent. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the Vikings defense is okay, but they should have had a little bit of success. You would have thought, running the ball. The one positive or two positives I thought is I do still think Neighbors is going to be a beast this year, and I think Wendell Robinson is going to surprise a lot of people. So they have some positives going there, but they need to figure out the Daniel Jones situation really quick.
yeah, Daniel Jones is just another one of those quarterbacks that's kind of just I don't know, terrible in my eyes right now. Um, I don't understand why he didn't target Malik Neighbors more yesterday. I know it was his first game as a receiver, but he's clearly your best receiver on that offense, and you need to be getting him the ball a lot more than he did, or at least looking his way a lot more. I was watching the game yesterday. He only targeted Malik Neighbors twice in the second half, and that's the most important half in the game is that second half to close things on out. So I don't know. You need to be looking his way a lot more than he did. Nothing against Wandale Robinson, but Malik Neighbors is that guy on your offense. He should be getting the ball quite a bit more. But yeah, that's all I'd have to say. I mean,
I don't disagree with you. I don't think he should force the ball to him, but he definitely needs to look his way. But I will say, Neighbors and Robinson are actually not a bad wide
No, they're
receiver
not. They're
duo.
definitely not.
I agree with you, Wiggs. Neighbors is the guy.
Yeah, I'm
And
not trying to discredit
no,
Wandale
but
either,
I
but
think Wandale is definitely. I mean, I think he showed something yesterday. That hey, listen, I'm here and stuff, and you know, outside of Neighbors, he definitely to me was the second best
yeah. And
receiver on that
watching
team.
Daniel Jones play yesterday, he just did not seem to care at all.
Well, he didn't look comfortable at all, and I don't know what they're doing with him. Um, they're trying to make him into Josh Allen because that's what their head coach. He's the guy that groomed Josh Allen with Buffalo and stuff, and he just does not have the talent of Josh
Yeah,
Allen.
he's just bad.
And yeah, so anyways, I think we can move on.
Patriots Bengals. Oh, let's do the NFC ones real quick. I have that on a separate graphic here. We'll do Steelers. Well, let's just talk about the Falcons here in this game.
Yeah, so this one, this was a surprise to me in the sense that I thought Kirk Cousins would have had a lot better game. He's had the whole off season to work with these guys. They've got a talented team. Their leading receiver was Ray McLeod. I don't understand that. Ray is a great player. Don't get me wrong, but he's a special teams guy. Drake London was non-existent in this game. Kyle Pitts, had a touchdown. And had 26 yards receiving. The second leading receiver on the team was Bijan Robinson. Now, listen, I give all the credit in the world to Pittsburgh's defense on that because Pittsburgh's defense looked really good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be a force this year. With that said, though, that's no excuse to not make adjustments and get the ball to your playmakers. Robinson still had, 68 yards rushing and 43 yards receiving. Atlanta obviously doesn't have the chemistry yet, so it's probably going to take them another game or two to get there, but they better figure it out soon. And I had, I think we both picked the Falcons for this one,
Yeah,
didn't
we
we?
did.
And so I think that it was just a surprising game, and we'll talk about the Steelers here in a little bit. So
Yeah, I was really surprised, and Kirk Cousins turned the ball over 3 different times. So I don't know. It was kind of a disappointment. I was expecting a lot more out of Kyle Pitts and Drake London, even Darnell Mooney to that extent. But it was kind of a pathetic performance in his first game back. So
well, their offensive line has been pieced together. So Kirk Cousins just moved from one, I, I mean, it's saying a lot when the Vikings' offensive line is better than your offensive
yeah,
line. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But even so, you got to figure something out.
yeah. Moving on here, we got Cardinals.
Yeah, the Cardinals against the Bills. The Bills were lucky to pull this one off. To be quite honest
Yeah,
with you, so the Cardinals actually they played pretty well. Uh, you know, which doesn't surprise me. I do think the Cardinals are one of the more underrated teams this year. I think the big surprise to me in this game is all the hype that they've been, all the hype around Harrison, and Harrison had one catch for 4 yards. So, I was a little surprised at that. The other thing that you want to keep an eye on is now that Kyle Murray's back, he was their leading rusher. Um, hey, Connor got in the end zone. He was effective in the passing game. He had 50 yards rushing, but Murray had 57. So I don't know. This is for you Connor owners, you're going to be TD dependent. I think this year on Connor, and you're going to have to hope that he's um, stays active in the passing game. Uh, like he did in this game. McBride, I thought still, he didn't have a great game, but he still had 30 yards on 5 receptions. The Bills are have a somewhat decent offense, so the Cardinals had this until the second half, and then Josh Allen just kind of took over. and we'll talk about that in a little bit here.
Yeah.
But I think the Cardinals sent a message to the league that, hey, listen, we're not going to be a pushover team this year. And actually, they had this game in hand in the first half at least, and they just kind of let it go in the second. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was a little bit surprised that Harrison didn't get the ball quite a bit more in this game. I know there was one point where Kyler Murray did miss him on like a 40-yard touchdown where Harrison was wide open, but um, still, even just missing on that one pass, I'm surprised he didn't get the ball at least 5 or 6 times in this game. But I don't know, maybe it was just first game. I don't know. First week's kind of fluky, so maybe that changes here in the future.
Listen, this goes to my point. Wiggs and I were talking about this. Back in the day, these teams used to play in the preseason. Now these players don't. So to me, that impacts the first couple games of the season. With that, we go into the Chicago Tennessee game again, and this was a big surprise to me. I thought, well, and we'll talk about Tennessee here in a bit. The big surprise to me here is well, first of all, if you compare the two guys, and I will talk to him about him in a minute here, Daniels definitely had a better game than Williams. And I told Wiggs this, and I've been preaching this to him. I told him that I really thought that Daniels is going to have a better year than Williams this year, and Williams had 93 yards. He threw for less than 50% completion rate in this game. He did not look good at all. Their running game was non-existent. I mean, Swift was, only had 30 yards on 10 carries, but they still pulled out the win. That's crazy to me, but that's because their defense came to play. Nope. And their defense looked really good in this game. Listen, I'm not too concerned about it. I think that this was a first game. I think Williams was playing a tough Tennessee defense, and he's going to have to adjust to the NFL game speed. So I'm not too concerned about it. DJ Moore, I think, is going to be fine. I just read something today, though. They're doing an MRI on Dunzy's knee, so I don't know what that means. So with you guys out there that have Romo Dunzy, you keep your eyes open because they had to do an MRI on his knee. This just came out of the blue. There was nothing said after the game, so something must have happened well after the game. So a little concerning there. But big win for Chicago, surprising win. We'll talk more about Tennessee here in a little bit.
Yeah, Chicago's win clearly just comes down to their defense. Caleb Williams did nothing in this game to get them the win in my eyes, so I wouldn't think as high as you thought originally on Williams, but he's gonna probably bounce back here at some point. He's not.
The only positive though is he didn't turn the ball over. So
yeah, but like it's not.
So there
hard.
Is a positive.
That's probably because he was throwing, these 5-yard passes and then
right. But the good thing about it is to me is that he didn't do anything that cost them to not win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He could have went out there, had 93 yards, and thrown three interceptions, right? So that's a positive thing to at least build off of.
Yeah, and I just looked at a stat last night. Caleb Williams is one of 2 quarterbacks in their rookie debut to throw for under 100 yards. The other one, Desmond Ridder.
Yeah,
so, just food for thought there. Yeah, it was kind of sad to watch. It sucked from a fantasy end of things. I kind of got the crap end of the stick there in my league, so yeah.
Yeah, so this one, again, another, I shouldn't say a surprise. I picked the Broncos in this one because, there was a lot of question marks to me in regards to how Seattle was going to look. Geno Smith actually didn't look too bad. He did throw an interception. Kenneth Walker looked really good. Had over 100 yards on 20 carries and a TD. Little surprising that Lockett was the leading receiver. I thought JSN would have uh, come up a little bit bigger. I wasn't surprised that DK had the game that he did. The Broncos just signed Sutton. I think it's Sutton. Their one
Sertan.
Sertan. Yeah, their one DB back. He's probably the best DB back in the league, I think. And he really locked down DK. It was a good matchup there, so it didn't surprise me. But I was a little surprised because I'm expecting JSN to kind of step it up this year. And to me, the fact that Lockett came out and had 77 yards and was the leading receiver was a little surprising there. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. I think it just shows, though, that you might want to set your expectations a little bit lower on JSN until we start seeing the next few games. And, as he always does, Lockett, out of the blue produces.
Yeah.
So, a great game, great win for Seattle on this one.
Yeah, and it's funny to see Lockett do that in the first game of the year. Every time I've had him on my team in the past, is the most annoying player to have on your roster. I think him and Amari Cooper are both like identical. You don't start them one week, they pop off, and then you start them the next week and they do nothing. So, um, if it was me, I wouldn't think too highly of Lockett. I would still, keep my hopes up there for JSN. But like you said, Sertan knocked down Metcalf, and that just opened things up for Lockett and the other receivers there in that offense.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, I don't, I don't remember what percentage he's available, but Charbonnet, the backup for Walker, even though he didn't have a lot of yards, he did get 8 carries, but he was active in the passing game and had a touchdown. So if he's available in your league and you're looking for, somebody on your bench, you might want to scale the waiver wire for him.
Cowboys are fucking.
Oh God, my favorite team. Yeah, I had the Browns winning this one. I think Wiggs, you had the Browns winning
Yeah.
too. Yeah, listen. What can I say? Uh, I don't think Dak Prescott looked that impressive myself. Uh, their defense looked really, really good. Mike Zimmer's got that defense humming really good. Deshaun Watson struggled. We'll talk more about that. So, you know, uh, so there wasn't really anything outstanding on the offense in my eyes. I mean, CD uh, was pretty much kept in check. Brandon Cooks had a touchdown on 40 yards, which is good to see that Cooks was in the end zone. Ferguson got hurt. I heard he sprained his MRI, which is good. It's not as bad as they initially thought, but he's probably going to miss a few weeks for you Ferguson owners. Elliott averaged 4 yards a carry, which isn't bad. Had a TD, but only 40 yards. Rico Rico was pretty active too. He had 8 carries, but they didn't really run the ball a lot. Uh, I'll just say that the better defense won this game because Dallas's defense really shined. They looked outstanding. Their special teams looked really good.
Special teams had a touchdown.
Yeah, they their defense and special teams to me were the shining point for Dallas.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like you said, nothing really shines here on the Dallas offense right now. We're not seeing like a typical 100 plus from CD Lamb or a running back popping off. Like just kind of a fair performance. It wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't bad.
And I think Dak only completed what, maybe 55% of his passes.
Yeah, 55 to 60 there, somewhere in that range.
So
I mean, they were still playing a tough defense, even though the Browns didn't really like show out on defense. Like you said, clearly the better defense there, and the Cowboys ended up winning the game. Like they just did not let Watson get comfortable, and that Cleveland offense struggled. But we'll talk more on them in a bit. The Buccaneers here.
well, and the Commanders.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so this one again, I picked Tampa Bay. I know Wiggs had picked Washington in this game. The reason I picked Tampa Bay is because they were at home. I just felt like there's a lot of question marks about the Washington defense, and we talked about, and it showed. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is a good offense in Tampa Bay. But Baker Mayfield just kind of picked them apart. He threw for 4 touchdowns. Baker is just, the Browns are probably kicking themselves for letting him go. He's found a home there in Tampa Bay. He's been pretty consistent. He's looked good. He looked really good in this game. Mike Evans had 2 touchdowns. He didn't have a crazy amount of yards. He had 61. I mean, Godwin came and showed. He played 8 receptions, 83 yards, a touchdown. It was good to see that because I think a lot of people had questions about Godwin. Rashad White, he was really active. He's starting to remind me more and more of CMC. I know people aren't going to want to hear that, but he didn't rush for a crazy amount of yards, but he made up for it in the passing game with 75 yards on 6 carries or on 6 receptions, and then he had 15 carries for 31 yards. Bucky Irving actually, he's somebody that you might want to look at on the waiver wire. He 9 carries, 62 yards, out almost averaged 7 yards a carry. That's crazy. So I think that they're going to use both of those guys in the offense pretty often. I don't think it's going to hurt White either because White's a big part of their passing game. So I really thought that Tampa Bay's offense looked really good. On the flip side, on the Commanders, I think that initially Jaden Daniels struggled a little bit. Uh, Second half, he turned it around. What did I tell you, Wiggs? He had over 80 yards rushing, didn't he? Didn't I say that? You were saying you thought he was going to have 50. He had over 80 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. He's going to be another Josh Allen, man. And Brian Robinson, actually, I thought he had a pretty good game. Rushing wise, I think Jaden took away from that a little bit, but Eckler was not did not impact the rush, his carries at all. Eckler only had 2 carries. Robinson had 12. Both Eckler and Robinson were the top 2 leading receivers. And I think we said that. Didn't we say Eckler was going to probably have a bigger role in early one of our videos? So I like what they're doing. I think Washington just needs to figure out their defense. And Robinson had 3 catches for 49 yards, and Eckler had 4 for 52 yards. So the disappointing part here was McLaurin, but he was playing a tough Tampa Bay defense. Their DBs and safeties on Tampa Bay are tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say about that. I think you touched on it pretty well. I was just kind of surprised when I see McLaurin more involved in the passing game. That's honestly really the only thing that I'm shocked by. Like the rushing, I understand there. I think Daniels will probably do like Lamar and probably lead in yards most weeks because he doesn't have the greatest line, so he does have to be kind of mobile. And they do design a lot of plays around him. Like several times when I was watching the game, it was literally a read option. So a lot of times he's going to be running the ball himself. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in Robinson or Eckler right now. Personally at least, but I do think Robinson in the red zone will get some decent touches.
Well, I disagree with the Robinson take. I think Robinson's still a solid RB2, especially with his involvement in the passing game. Because look he had almost 8 points just in the passing game alone. And I wouldn't worry about McLaurin because just like we talked about DK, McLaurin played a really tough. They got some really good corners there in Tampa Bay. So.
Time will tell. The Rams and the Lions.
Wow, this was a crazy game. I had picked the Lions to win. Did you pick the Lions too? Yeah. So this was a crazy game. The Rams kind of surprised me a little bit. I didn't think they were gonna dominate like they did. I mean, they really did kind of have control of the game up until the last quarter.
Yep.
And so, Stafford had over 300 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Typical Stafford type game. Kyren. Everybody was making such a big deal about him returning kicks. He wasn't even their kick returner. You know who was their kick returner? Their rookie, Corum.
Well, I think it was punt returning. He was out there for punt returning.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
They were making such a big deal out of that. But he had both of those guys out there returning kicks. He had 18 carries for 50 yards. I would have liked to see a little bit more there. But LA's defense actually looked pretty good.
Yeah, Detroit's
I thought
defense
they
looked
looked
good.
really good. A lot better than I thought they would. Kyron still had a touchdown. He only had a few receptions, so he didn't do much on the receiving end. Uh, the big surprise to me here was Cooper Kupp, and I think the reason Kupp had the game he did was because Puka got hurt there in the second half.
Yep.
And they haven't really given much updates on that. Another big surprise and probably a real big active waiver wire guy this week is going to be Tyler Johnson. A little fun fact here for you guys: Tyler Johnson's from Minnesota, and Wiggs here actually played against him in football and basketball in a couple games. So we know Tyler really well. Wiggs' brother actually played against him as well. So it was nice to see a Minnesotan like that we know come out and do what he did. He definitely they didn't lose a beat though when Puka went down, did they?
No, I mean Tyler Johnson stepped up big. I was not expecting him to be the guy to do that either.
No, and Demarcus Robinson, he took away from him a little bit, but he had a good game. Colby Patterson, Parkinson, their
Parkinson.
tight end, actually had a good game. So the Rams look good. On the flip side, on the Lions, you had Jared Goff. I was expecting a bigger game from
Yeah.
Goff, but you know what? We didn't know what to expect with the Rams defense. Rams defense actually looked pretty good. Goff had an interception, only 217 yards. He did have one touchdown. I'll tell you, Montgomery's still looking good, and I know people probably aren't liking that, especially if you have Gibbs. But you know what? Gibbs is really a lot more active in the passing game than Montgomery, so it kind of balances out. I think. I think they got a great 1-2 punch there. Either one of those guys are going to get you fantasy
Yeah.
points. Both of them had a TD. I mean, Gibbs had almost 100 yards. Well, he had 74 yards and a TD combined. So Jamison Williams, he looked outstanding. I, I know Wiggs has had some question marks about him this year. He looked really good. St. Brown, the Rams got Jalen Ramsey, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So I think St. Brown was getting shadowed pretty well, and Laporta had an okay game. 4 receptions on 45 yards, but the big surprise, well, not for me, but I think for Wiggs, is probably Jamison Williams coming out and doing what he did. And to have this game go to overtime and then Montgomery score a touchdown, I mean, that's crazy. It
Yeah.
was a crazy good game.
Yep. Pretty good overall there from I think at least both offenses, both defenses kind of showed up to play as well. So um, it made sense on why it was a 6 point game, and it was a fun one to watch. I was a little shocked by a few things like the Jamison Williams over St. Brown situation there, but sometimes your receiver's getting covered and you just have to find other options.
I tell you, the NFC North is going to be a fun one to watch this year. All right, so now we go to the AFC here, and we're going to jump into the Patriots versus the Bengals. This was a big surprise to me for a couple reasons. One, Patriots went into Cincinnati. It was a road game. Uh, you know, Jacoby Brissett's their starting. Brissett is their starting quarterback. Uh, you know, uh, there was a lot of question marks with them, right? Their defense, hamstrung Burrow all game. I know Chase was out there. They didn't have Higgins. But I think we talked about this in one of our earlier videos. Wiggs and I both have talked about how it hurt them this year because of the Higgins contract thing, and then Chase is still trying to get his contract and stuff like that. Uh, but I think one of their bigger losses was Tyler Boyd. I think them losing Tyler Boyd as their third receiver, was a big loss. Chase still managed 6 receptions on 62 yards, uh, but it wasn't anything spectacular. Again, it didn't show me that he should be the highest paid receiver in the league for sure.
Well, he's getting locked down by a
So,
super young corner too.
I mean, Burrow actually 21 out of 29, not bad there, but only 164 yards. Moss averaged almost 5 yards a carry. He only had 9 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. Uh, but they just couldn't get anything going in this game, um, all around. Now, on the flip side, Stevenson on the Patriots, man, he had a massive game. I mean, he had 120 yards on 25 carries. He averaged almost 5 yards a carry, 4.8. That's pretty crazy to me against a tough Bengals defense. He had one touchdown. He wasn't very active in the passing game. He did have three receptions, but only for 6 yards. But a big game for Stevenson. So maybe that's a good sign. What this also tells me is the Patriots were winning the time of possession. That's probably that helped them out. Uh, a little surprising. Well, I shouldn't say surprising, but their leading receiver was their backup tight end and Austin Hooper. KJ Osborne and Demiro Douglas and Polk, none of the receivers did anything. And I think that's going to be the case throughout the year. You're going to see the top receiver on that team week to week change. And a lot of times it's going to probably be their tight end. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, this game was. I think we both bet on the Bengals. That well, not bet. We picked the Bengals there to win, and it was kind of a shock. I'm surprised Stevenson carried the ball 25 times and Gibson only really touched the ball 7 there, but
I think that's a tale of what their offense is going to be, though. They're going to try to pound the ball this year.
I thought like Gibson would be more involved in the passing game, but there's nothing there. So Steelers.
Yeah, so we already touched on the Falcons and the Steelers game. This was a little bit surprising again. Their defense came out and played, right, yeah. Wiggs? I mean, they balled out. But listen, the one thing I like about this is that Justin Fields came in and he didn't try to do too much. He only had 156 yards on 23 attempts, 17 completions, but he didn't throw any interceptions. I don't believe he fumbled or turned the ball over. So he did what he needed to do to help secure a win. He didn't lose it for him, and he kept them in the game. He managed the game. Harris 3.5 yards on 20 carries, so he had 70 yards. Fields had 57 yards rushing as well, which I think you're going to see more rushing from Fields than you would Russell Wilson. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to be doing that. It was a little shocking to see that Jaylen Warren wasn't a little bit more involved in the offense, but maybe they didn't feel like they needed him. So Pickens had a decent game, 6 receptions on 85 yards. No surprises there that he was the leading receiver along with Freiermuth. Freiermuth had a decent, would have been nice for more yardage, but he still was involved in the passing game. So I think the biggest surprise here for me was I really felt that Warren was going to be more involved in the offense. And actually, Warren was not as involved as I thought he would be, which was a little disappointing, especially in the receiving game. And maybe that had to do with the fact that Justin Fields was just named the quarterback, a couple hours before the game. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where maybe you get a mobile quarterback in there and plans change going into it. But overall, like, decent performances there from Pickens and Harris. I mean, Fields did what he had to do, which was get the win. They didn't throw a single touchdown. They kicked all field goals. So 18-10 to win. I think they're the only team this week that didn't score a touchdown that won a game. So,
but I will say this: you Russell Wilson owners, you better be if you drafted Russell Williams, I'd be a little concerned here because the more games Wilson misses here, the more wins that Field stacks up, the less likely Wilson's going to be the starting quarterback.
Moving on, Texans Colts.
This was another good game. I mean, Wiggs, I think we talked about this when we were going over the matchups, that this was going to be an exciting game. It definitely was as close as we thought it was. It gave us everything we wanted. CJ Stroud didn't throw for as many yards as I thought he would, but he still 234 yards. He had 24 completions on 32 attempts, which was pretty good. 2 touchdowns. I think the big surprise to me here is Mixon having 30 carries. I mean, he averaged over 5 yards a carry. He had almost 160 yards on with one TD, and he was still active. Not as active, as he usually is, but he still had 3 receptions for 19 yards. Mixon, that's probably why Stroud didn't throw as much
Yeah.
because Mixon was having so much success.
Mixon had 178 total yards.
Yeah, he had a crazy game. One thing I think we did learn in this game is that the 3 receivers that they have, all 3 of them are going to be active. And I know some of your Nico Collins owners were worried about Stephon Diggs coming in, but this should show you right here. I don't think Stephon Diggs coming in is going to impact Nico Collins one bit whatsoever. He still had 6 receptions for 117 yards. Yeah, he didn't have a touchdown. Yeah, Diggs had 2 touchdowns. Diggs had 6 receptions for 33 yards. But that just goes to show you they're both going to be getting the ball a lot. Even Tank Dell had 3 receptions for 40 yards. So I think that you shouldn't be concerned at all. If there's anything that would be concerning to me, it would be how involved is Dalton Schultz actually going to be in the offense as the tight end, because he only had 3 receptions for 16 yards. So that would be the only thing that I'd be a little concerned about there. And then on the flip side, I think Anthony Richardson came out and showed um, that he's definitely the Colts quarterback of the future. He didn't have the greatest game. He was only 9 for 19, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw 1 interception. He was their leading rusher, which, surprise, surprise, I think, we talked about the 56 yards. Taylor struggled, had only 48 yards on 16 carries and a touchdown. But Richardson made up for what he didn't do in the passing game by having a rushing TD and rushing yards. So, of course, that makes his fantasy points more. The big surprise to me here a little bit was how effective Alec Pierce was in this one with 3 receptions for 125 yards and a touchdown. Pittman still had he I wish he had a better game, but I'm not too concerned about it. I still think he's going to be fine. Um, a little bit more surprising to me was Adonai Mitchell. I thought he was going to have a little bit bigger involvement in the offense, but it seemed to me like it wasn't there for him this game. So something to keep an eye on, and I'm sure Alec Pierce is going to be a hot waiver wire addition this week.
Yeah, and Alec Pierce, a bulk of his yards came on 1 reception there for a touchdown. I think like 60 some of those yards came on that. But that aside, he is a deep ball threat. Like at any given point, you could go down the field like Tyreek Hill and get the ball, and it'll just fall into place there for him. But
Plus, so Richardson's both of his throwing touchdowns were probably over 50 yards, right? So he's obviously
yeah,
because Dolan had that 54-yard reception for a touchdown. So
yeah, and we'll see how this offense goes. Me seeing Richardson only complete 9 passes on 19 attempts is kind of iffy. Because if you really take away 2 of those receptions, he's down 100 yards, and I don't know. To me, that stat line's kind of inconsistent. But we'll see here in coming weeks. His rushing ability makes up for what he won't do in the passing game, and I think it showed. 56 yards and a touchdown there was the leading running rusher in this game. Michael Pittman, I thought, was going to be more involved, but I think this is kind of going to be like an offense similar to the Ravens, where it's really only going to be one receiver that has a really good week. Um, I don't know if it's going to be Pittman yet, but it should be ideally. Kind of see it. It's a hard offense to judge because you have a mobile quarterback and he's still really young and can make a decent
the
amount of
Texans
mistakes.
have a decent defense. I mean, they're not terrible. So
But moving on, Bills.
yeah, so we already talked about the Cardinals here. The Bills really struggled, I thought, in this game, especially the first half. Josh Allen, I don't know what it is with Josh Allen. He did this last year too. He seems to need the need to get going in the first half, and then he doesn't really light it up until the second half. Allen had 232 yards passing with 2 passing touchdowns. He rushed for 39 yards and had 2 rushing touchdowns, which again, we talked about this for you James Cook owners, that, Cook is going to be involved in the offense, which he was. He had over 100 yards combined, 71 rushing and 32 receiving, but Allen's really going to take away from any kind of TD production for Cook. I think Cook's TDs are going to mostly come when it is either he breaks one off rushing or he gets one thrown to him down in the red zone. So that but again, Cook still had a solid game. Uh, it was nice to see Keenan Coleman come out and have 4 receptions for 51 yards. I know that's not lighting the world on fire, but it does show that he's going to be an active person in their offense. And Shakir came out, had 3 receptions, 42 yards for a touchdown as well. What was a little disappointing for me is Dalton Kincaid. I think he only had 1 reception for 11 yards. I thought he was going to be more involved in the offense. I still think he is going to be involved in the offense, so I'm not too concerned about it. The Cardinals' defense is, to me, underrated. They don't get enough flowers that they should, and they really played them well up until the second half. So, like I said, I'm not too worried about anything here. And Wiggs, I don't know what you think.
Typical Josh Allen performance. I wasn't really expecting that here in week one. I thought he was going to struggle a little bit more, just because I'm not sold still on his receiving core. James Cook came on, had a pretty decent game. Would love to see a touchdown behind him, but other than that, pretty standard Buffalo Bills game.
Yep.
Titans.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, I don't know what was going. Chicago's defense played really really good. So they came out and they balled. They Levy's did not look good at all. Uh, he 32 attempts, only 19 receptions for 127 yards. That tells me that their offensive line was not um, that great. He threw for 1 touchdown, but had 2 picks. So Levy's didn't look that great. Tony Pollard came out, averaged 5 yards a carry, had a touchdown on 82 yards. I thought it was going to be more of a split between him and Spears. Makes it a little bit concerning for you Spears owners because I thought it was going to be more equal, but I think they just went with the hot hand. And Pollard wasn't as active as he had 1 less reception than Spears in the passing game. Calvin Ridley came out, had 3 receptions for 50 yards, which, given the way Levy's was playing, is actually probably pretty good, right, Wiggs? And D Hop wasn't a factor in this game at all. Tyler Boyd really wasn't a factor. Their offense just did not look good at all, outside of Pollard. So they definitely have some stuff to work on. I don't know if it's because that Chicago just came in and just played that great on defense and they weren't expecting what they saw. I don't know if it was just shaking the rust off. They have way too much talent to only put 17 points up.
Yeah, just not a good game overall. There, I was expecting a little bit more from Levy's, at least 3 touchdowns and like 250 to 300 yards. But,
Is what it is, right?
yep. Jaguars Dolphins.
My favorite game. Woohoo! Listen, this was. I thought it was going to be a little bit more high scoring. I don't know about you, Wiggs, but 20-17. It was a good game. Jaguars played them really tough. Trevor Lawrence did not. I didn't think he had a great game. 162 yards on 12 completions, 21 attempts, 1 touchdown. Uh, you know, these guys that got these big contracts, Lawrence and Jones. I mean, listen, they need to be producing better than this. Uh, I mean, Tank Bigsby came out. He actually had more yards rushing. He had was averaging 6 yards a carry, 73 yards. ETN, had a decent game on the he didn't have as good a game rushing as Bigsby, but he was more involved in the passing game because he had 2 receptions for 15 yards and 44 yards rushing. What was a little surprising to me was Gabe Davis's involvement. He was a little bit more involved in this than I expected. 3 receptions, 62 yards. I was excited to see that Brian Thomas Jr. came out, had 4 targets, caught all 4 of them for 4 receptions, 47 yards and a touchdown. And Wiggs and I, what did we tell you guys? We predicted this. Yeah, he had 30 yards, but it was only on 1 reception. Christian Kirk, to me, is the disappointment here. On the flip side, I think Tua had a really good game. He had over 300 yards for a touchdown. Uh, I think I called it, and I think you did the same. Uh, I told you guys both Hill and Waddle were going to have over 100 yards, and they did. Hill, even though he was detained in handcuffs, which he had a celebration to show that as well, he had over 130 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Jaden Waddle, and that was on 7 receptions. Waddle had 5 receptions, 109 yards. I'm telling you, they're the 2 best receivers, the best duo of receivers in the league right now. Achani came out, had a great game in the passing, 7 receptions for 76 yards. He didn't do much rushing. He only had 24 yards. But what we did find out here is that Achani is actually going to be the one running back that I think is going to be the one that's going to be the most active in the offense. I think Mozart's involvement is going to be limited this year, and I think we're going to see him maybe in the red zone and relieving Achani, but I don't think Mozart's going to have as big of a role in the offense this year as he did last year.
I'm surprised this game was only a 3-point game, considering the fact that Tua threw for 340 yards.
I know.
I'm sitting here looking at this, and I'm just like baffled that they only won by 3 points. You had Tyreek there and Waddle over 100 yards. Achane had 76 there as well. I mean, solid performances out of them. I don't think Achane's going to be putting up 76 yards every single game here. I think his rushing will probably be around 40 to 50 each game, with him probably receiving for another 30, 40. I'm still not sold on Achane just yet, at least. I think there's a lot of talent here in this offense, and really it's just going to come down to one, how good Tua plays and how often he's getting Achane the ball in the passing game, but how well their offense is going to be as well. And
I do think he's going to be the primary running back, though, now.
yeah, he definitely could be. I still see Mozart and Wilson Jr. getting their touches there. At some point, they could bring in their other running back as well, and Wright. And I don't know. Things will change. This offense has never consistently just had one running back over the last, I don't know how many years. It's been a lot of years where they've utilized more than one running back. So, um, I don't know. I'm still not sold there, but that's just me. On the side of the Jaguars, I'm hoping that Lawrence throws for more yards in upcoming games, even if it's just 250, because I think Brian Thomas could be sitting there around 100 yards each week, and Gabe Davis probably will be that wide receiver too behind them. Move on from that. The Broncos.
Yeah, the Broncos, listen, Bo Nix struggled. He was playing a newer defense in Seattle with their head coach being a defensive guy who's known for his defenses. So it doesn't surprise me that he struggled a little bit. I still thought that they were going to pull out the win here. But what I will say is he threw for 42 times. That's crazy to me to have your rookie quarterback throwing him 42 times. His completion percentage was, between 55 and 60%. He had 2 interceptions. He scrambled for 35 yards. What was a little disappointing here is their run game. I think that Javonte Williams didn't do very much in the run game. I don't think anybody really stood out in their receiving game. I'm not too concerned about it, though. I think they're going to have some growing pains here with Bo Nix, and I don't know that anybody's really expecting a lot out of the Broncos this year, anyways. I think he's only going to get better, uh, as each game goes on. I was a little surprised that Josh Reynolds was their top receiver at 5 receptions at 45 yards. But I think that's going to change, as each game goes on. McLaughlin, their other running back, was active in the passing game. Javonte Williams wasn't. He was only targeted and only had 1 reception in the passing game. So I think again though, what this comes down to is the Broncos need to figure out the running back situation, because Javonte, he just hasn't proven himself yet, and he's been struggling.
I was a bit surprised this game was even close, to be honest with you. I think after seeing this game, I actually think the Broncos could be decent this year. It's just a matter of getting Bo Nix into the flow of things a little bit better. I mean, you completed the ball 26 times for 138 yards. We're talking very little on yardage on average there. So, getting him more comfortable on throwing like middle to deeper passes with his wide receiving core, who I think is a little underrated right now. I think Cortland Sutton and Josh Reynolds are both really good receivers, and I think they could be utilized down the field. I mean, we saw it with Reynolds last year with Jared Goff. Utilize the man down the field. I like that to see McLaughlin was targeted 5 times in that receiving game. I think his yardage will go up in that. I think this offense at some point is going to be a force to reckon with. I think they just need to figure out their run game, like you said, and then Lennox just needs to get more comfortable and let the ball loose a few times.
Yeah, I agree. They got to get Mims more involved in it too. So
I think. We got one more game here. Oh, two.
yeah, let's see the Chargers versus the Raiders. Now listen, this one surprised me just for the sense that I thought the Raiders defense was gonna have a much better game against the Chargers, but Max Crosby was actually held in check by the rookie tackle that the Chargers drafted early in the draft this year. He actually had a really good game against Crosby and held him in check. Uh, so it didn't surprise me, with Crosby being held in check, that this was the outcome. I think what we did find out here is a couple things. One, uh, the Raiders have a lot to work on offense. Two, I think we found out the Chargers are going to be a better team than everybody thinks they're going to be. Which again, I've been preaching that to Wiggs here. That with Harbaugh as their coach, Harbaugh has a history of turning teams around really quick, and that doesn't surprise me here. So I think the Chargers are going to be better than everybody thinks they are, and stuff. I still think the Raiders are going to have a good season. I'm not giving up on them yet. What I will say though is Minshew needs to step it up, because if he doesn't, I think they're going to have to look at making a QB change. He had 257 yards on 25 completions with one touchdown, one interception. Zamar White was a little bit disappointing in this one, but Harbaugh's defenses have always been tough against the run, so it doesn't surprise me that White only had 44 yards on 13 carries. I was a little surprised that Madison was as involved as he was in the passing game, but what that tells me is that there was a lot of third downs in this game, and that the Raiders were having to deal with, and I think Madison was involved in a lot of that because he had 4 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown. So Madison's probably going to be another guy that, if he wasn't drafted, is going to be a waiver wire pickup. Devontae Adams only had 5 catches on 59 yards, and Jacoby Myers had 3 catches on 61 yards. So, and Brock Bowers actually came out, had 6 receptions on 58 yards, which was a little bit better than I was expecting, given that he was supposed to be a little bit limited, but I don't think he was, because he had a pretty decent game. So I'm not too worried about the Raiders. I was a little bit surprised about the Chargers. So on the flip side of this, though, the Chargers obviously are going to be a running team this year. That's their plan. You could tell Dobbins, 10 carries, 13.5 yards average. He must have broke one.
Yeah, he broke like a 60-yarder.
He broke a 60 yards, but 135 yards and a touchdown. Gus Edwards had 11 carries for 26 yards. So I think Dobbins has a little bit of an advantage here right now. But I still think you're going to see an even amount of split, because Harbaugh likes to use multiple running backs in his offenses. It was nice to see McConkey have a touchdown, 5 receptions for 39 yards. I know, Wiggs, you're really high on him. I think he's going to separate himself as the number one receiver this year. I really do. And it was a little surprising to see Quentin Johnston as the number 2 receiver in the game here, with 3 receptions for 38 yards. And then Hurst and Palmer were right behind there. So I don't think there was really any big surprises to me on this in regards to what the Chargers want to do. They want to run the ball. That's what they want to do. That's what Harbaugh always has wanted to do. So you got to curb your expectations for Justin Herbert. And I think the one thing we did learn is McConkey's going to be a big part of this offense.
Yeah, and looking at this right now, and I had Herbert on my fantasy team all of last year. Herbert wasn't far off from the amount of attempts he typically has. Um, typically it'd be around like 40 attempts a game, 35 to 40. I think his attempts will go up passing wise here to about 30 on average per game. So it's not far off from what he had in years prior. I just think he had a bit of a slow game adjusting to, a completely new receiving core. You have more running backs involved. I don't know. It wasn't too far fetched to see Lad McConkey go off for 100 yards in this game if Justin Herbert just completed the ball a few more times and went a little bit deeper with it. But I think as the weeks go on, he's going to grow that connection with McConkey, and I could very well see McConkey having several 100-yard games here coming up with a touchdown or two. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards looked pretty decent for the most part.
They just got to stay healthy.
Yeah, and I think that run game will be really nice to help open up that receiving game as well. And Dobbins, I think, will be pretty involved in the passing game here. I know he only had 3 receptions this game. I think it's going to be more of a Eckler type connection with Herbert at some point with Dobbins and receiving the ball. We'll kind of see how that plays out, though. I do have high hopes here for McConkey, and I do actually have high hopes for Dobbins in this offense as well. When he gets into the red zone, expect Gus Edwards to touch the ball more. He's just a bigger body, and he's hard to take down. So
Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, came from the Ravens. You're going to see a similar offense to the Ravens.
Yeah. And then on the other side of things, I thought Minshew actually had a pretty good game. I just wish he would have finished off a few drives there with another touchdown or two. Completed the majority of his passes there. The one player that I just need to see more out of is Zamir White. You get the starting role. Do not look like Alexander Madison from last year. You need to come out and have a better game. 13 carries, 44 yards isn't bad, but hold on to the ball. You can't fumble it, and you gotta. In my eyes, you need to be around like 60 or 70 at that point with 13 carries, but the NFL, it's not always going to happen like that. His fumble yesterday kind of knocked a lot of people's production, and he wasn't really involved a crazy amount in the passing game, so that was a little disappointing to see. The one thing I'll give Madison, well, one knock I'll give Madison is one of his receptions was for like 28 yards, 30 yards there, so that was the most, that was like the bulk there of his receiving yards because it came on the touchdown, so.
Yeah, but keep in mind the Chargers defense is really good. So and they are tough against the run. So it doesn't surprise me that Zamir only had 44 yards. I expect that he's going to have better games in the future.
Well, and I'm hoping he carries the ball a little bit more. Only 13 times in a game for a starting running back's kind of grim in my eyes. And then lastly, I think we just have one more here in the Browns.
Yeah, listen, yeah, we watched this game and Deshaun Watson looked terrible. There's, I mean, I don't want to be critical, but I'm going to be. He looked terrible. He didn't. He only threw for. He only completed a little over 50% of his attempts. He was 24 for 45, 169 yards, 1 TD, 2 interceptions. He was missing receivers left and right yesterday. I mean, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, Wiggs, but he was missing his receivers left and right. His accuracy was not good. Jerome Ford, you know, he had 44 yards, but I wasn't expecting Jerome Ford to rush for a lot against this Cowboys defense because they're tough. And he still managed to get a touchdown. Plus, he had 6 receptions with 25 yards. He was pretty active here. It was nice to see Jerry Jeudy involved in this, and Gugua, and Joku. He was involved as well. He's got a high ankle sprain now. He's gonna probably miss a couple weeks from what I'm hearing. So something to keep your eyes on. But what was disappointing was Amari Cooper wasn't as involved in the offense as he should have been, and when he did get targets, Watson missed them.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that Cooper wasn't catching the ball. It's because Watson he just couldn't hit his targets to save his life. So they need to figure it out. Here's another guy that got a big contract that is not producing at all. And at some point, the Browns are going to have to say, do we need to cut our ties and move on? Because they have too good of a defense Because listen, the score here doesn't reflect on their defense. I think you would agree with me, Wags. I mean, because uh, it was they had a special teams touchdown. I don't remember if they had a defensive touchdown or not, but I just think that their offense did the defense no favors at all, and they definitely need to figure it out.
Yeah, and I'll just keep it short and simple. Deshaun Watson needs to get a grip. That was a pathetic performance. Like you said, he's another one of those highly paid quarterbacks like Daniels and Lawrence that are just not producing. You need to produce if you want to get paid that much. If not, it's time for Cleveland to move on and get rid of him because he's done nothing since getting traded on over here. Um, and it's really just sad to see. He's only played in like a third of the games as well. So what's the point in keeping him on your roster? He just looks like crap, and I don't see him bouncing back at all. To be honest, I think it's time to start shopping around, even this early in the season after one game. Personally,
We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully he bounces back. I hope he does because he's got a lot of talent on that offense. So
well, that wraps it up.
well, that's our edition of our recap for the Sunday games here. Monday night tonight, the Jets versus
49ers.
49ers. So that should be another good game. So with that, check us out on Fantasy Fools PPR, Snapchat, X, Instagram, TikTok. Like, subscribe, share. Give us feedback. If you got any questions, just know we're here to help when we can. And hopefully, you find this content useful. And until then, we'll see you next time.